our first panel is regarding the uncertain future. Now, we've all been extensively hearing or even using the term new normal, but what this new normal will actually look like remains a question for scientists, policymakers, and of course, entrepreneurs. Now, for entrepreneurs, it's actually crucial to have at least some idea regarding the future consumer for whom they actually want to create value. We are privileged to have some amazing minds sharing their fascinating stories during this panel. Properly and thoroughly actually addressing their achievements would need a separate panel for itself. So for the sake of time, I will stick to a brief introduction. For more detail, though, you can always visit our social media pages. First, we have Lopa, founder and CEO at Diversity UK. She's a digital entrepreneur with extensive experience in creating startups and transforming businesses through technology. She has judged many programs and awards and received awards in related fields, including the Queen's Award for Enterprise Promotion. She also holds an honorary doctorate. Next, we have Anushka, who quite fascinatingly has extensive experience and passion for space. She founded NOT, which provides a 360 approach innovation strategy for space agencies. She is also a co-founder of London Space Network, which focuses on strengthening the UK space community. Last but not least, we have Inspiring Ryan, who is a TEDx speaker and a content creator with over 2.2 million views on LinkedIn. Alongside his other achievements, he's also passionate for sharing his message regarding dyslexia and how it is not a disability, as we call it, but rather a superpower. So if I could please ask that we start with Lopa, and then we move to Anushka and then to Ryan. And thank you everyone for joining us. And Lopa, I'll leave the floor to you.
I'm not going to take up too much room because actually I think some of the interesting things will be around the questions that the panel debates. But I think the only thing I would want to say, thank you first for having me. It is fantastic to be here with your audience, even though it's remote. And I've been an entrepreneur for a very long time. In fact, this month I will have been an entrepreneur for 30 years, which is, when you look back on it, it's an incredibly long time. I know it's been a very, very difficult year for a lot of people, but consequently, often uncertainty is often a good driver for entrepreneurship. And everybody thinks, oh, it's very uncertain, I shouldn't do things. But actually, embrace the uncertainty. Entrepreneurs will always come up with new ideas, and uncertainty and adversity often leads to opportunity. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anushka.
Yeah, I really love that. And I agree very much in that these are currently unwritten times for everyone. So nobody has an advantage of any experience of going through something like this for our generation particularly. Of course, we can look back to Spanish flu and other such horrendous diseases that took over like the world. But I think this is a unique time. We're empowered with technology in a way that hopefully is more equalizing, is something that I'm really passionate about, rather than just being about a specific elite of people being able to design solutions. The solutions are there for everyone to find. And actually, I don't want anyone here to feel the pressure that they have to solve or fix anything. Everything joins up in the way it's supposed to. So much like how David mentioned in his last talk, that if things don't align, don't worry about it. Like the no's don't matter so much. And I've always said to people that when I've received a no from the universe or a person, it's never no and hard. It's just a not right now. So if you're struggling and if you're worried or if you're frustrated about anything that is out of your control, or just you're not seeing the results that you really want to see and you know you've got the answer to something, it's okay. Just take a beat in yourself, as hard as that is, because I've been there many times. I fail all the time. But I think the trick is to sometimes understand that that's there for a reason. And I could waffle on like the same sort of vein, but I think David articulated it beautifully. And the key thing is that time is the one factor that none of us can control. And we worry about money, we worry about server capability and server space and all those other things. But time is the one metric that none of us ever really consider. So when it comes to consumerism, particularly in this panel in the future, I think we've got some really interesting learning to take forward. And I'll hand it back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Noosh. Ryan, would you like to inspire us?
Yeah, thanks for that. It's a very high bar now after what's been said. I echo all the points, and I think the level of resilience shown by everyone on this panel, and even the event, to keep this event alive during times like this, during a pandemic, that's I've definitely never experienced before, and that most of the world and most of our generation has never experienced before, is tremendous resilience. And even to be in entrepreneurship so long, and even to be able to be connected in this world and have this conversation right now through Zoom when we're all in different countries is just amazing. So I'm really excited to be on the panel, learn more about everyone's story, and hopefully share some interesting concepts and ideas. So
thank you so much. So my first question is actually for Noosh. Noosh, we had a discussion, if you remember, that through which you actually mentioned that you're trying to make your decisions perhaps more slowly and in a more mindful way. I'm interested to know a little bit about that. And well, the question was initially to sort of tell us what you would do differently if you would go back to pre-COVID times. But now I think, building up on that discussion that we had together, could you elaborate this a little bit? What brought you to this decision to take things more mindfully?
So it's so easy to look back now and really kick yourself for the things that you didn't do, but that's not going to change tomorrow. It's not going to change today, and it's not going to change like the present. So I think it's really, I think that's what really struck me, is that I could kick myself that I didn't do the things that were on my to-do list that would have maybe led to a different position for me currently. But actually, I'm sat where I am today as a result of all of the decisions that have happened in the last year or so, right? So I think being more mindful to me means really listening to yourself, really considering your circumstances as they've changed. My personal circumstances have meant that I am caring for my 2 retired parents who have medical issues. And that automatically means that even if I wanted to pivot to get a full-time or even a part-time role at the moment, I'd have to do so in a way that would be with an organization that was extremely understanding of my really different circumstances. So when it comes to the slow thinking, one of the things that I've been doing is time mapping. I've really been looking at my day and really looking to find the points of joy in my day and the things that make me happy and fulfilled. And whether you call it the conscious, I can't remember the exact frame that David used, but it was beautiful, quantum consciousness. I consider that flow state. So when things align in a way that bring you joy and fulfill you and drive you forward in your own personal growth or learning are things that I look out for. Now, sometimes they're physical things, where I went for a beautiful long 3-hour walk around Battersea Park, which is local to me. And that was actually one of the most inspiring things I've done, because not only was my body physically tired and I had a great sleep, the next day I woke up with a ton of ideas that I don't think I would have had I literally just been making 3 meals a day for my beautiful parents. So I think sometimes you have to shake up your energy within the rules of what we have to abide by currently to find, previously pre-lockdown, I'd go and spend an afternoon walking around Shoreditch looking at graffiti, or I'd go to the National Gallery or any of the free kind of museum spaces in London to afford me that inspiration. I don't have that now. So I'm mindfully using my daily walk in my local commons and parks to find the inspiration in nature and reconnecting in ways that I think I would have otherwise always overlooked.
Absolutely. Yeah. Going for a walk is the thing right now, isn't it? Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. Do any of the other panelists have anything to add to that?
As an entrepreneur, often you're so busy looking after the business and looking after your employees and looking after your customers that you put off decisions, particularly when it's, around a particular product which is not working out, or a service that's not working out, or, in my case, a couple of titles which really needed to come to an end. And so that's the advantage COVID has given, that it's forced you to make decisions. So I would say if you are starting now, embrace that decision making, because the problem is you can often sit there, if you haven't started, you can often sit there sort of teetering on the brink of, oh no, should I? It's too high risk. It's, you overthink it. If you're already in a business, then you need to use this time to reprioritize very quickly. Personally, myself, what I've learned through this period and what I would do differently is entrepreneurs don't often invest enough in themselves. Firstly, we're terrible. We never listen to advice until we don't know how to do something. And then we're suddenly thinking, who can I ask for advice? And then the second thing is you don't learn, and you've got to keep learning. And so I've used this time to look at the skills I've got now, sort of self-awareness exercise, and the skills I need to develop to get to the next step. So use that time constructively. And there's an awful lot of things out there that you can take advantage of. And then finally, the thing that's really changed for me is to be kinder, be kinder to people. And I know that sounds a trite thing to say, but often you're so driven for the business that you forget basic human kindness, just to say thank you and, good morning and how are you? And then actually to listen to the answer. It goes back to what Nush was saying about perhaps slowing down a little bit and being more in the moment. I guess that's for me what mindfulness is.
Thank you very much, Lopa. Ryan, do you have anything to add to that, or should we move on?
No, I think I echo what's been said so far, and I think something that I've been really pondering over the last year since this has all happened, and someone said it to me, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Is that we're all in the same storm, but not everyone's in the same boat. Some people have small boats, rafts. Other people have maybe big yachts, metaphorically speaking, and. I've been thinking about that so much, and just the message Lopa said is be kind. You honestly don't know what's going on in people's homes, circumstances. So even for me to give advice or anything wouldn't do justice, because I don't have the context. But it's just amazing points given so far, and that's a quote that I've just been pondering about over the last year since this all happened.
Lopa, interestingly, you mentioned decision making, and since this year FFC has a specific focus on behavioral sciences and the psychological aspects of the future consumer, you mentioned, there are two systems that people basically make their decisions. System one, which is more emotional, and system two that is more rational and all that. So I wanted to ask you that you mentioned that you really want to sort of pay more attention to your emotions when you're making a decision, things like being kinder to people. And Nush and Ryan also mentioned that as well. I was wondering, as an entrepreneur, do you think you rely mostly on your rational way of thinking, or do you really try to trust your gut feelings a little bit more when you want to make a decision?
Wow, that's a very interesting. I think for most entrepreneurs, it's a balancing act. So when you start, you would start with the rational mindset, particularly when you're fundraising, you're looking to, get co-founders or team together, looking for your customers, developing your strategy and a business plan. All of that is rational thinking, logical thinking. And then the gut feel is really, really important for entrepreneurs. That's the empathetic side of yourself. And it's always a balancing act. So, and you can get it wrong. I can tell you that I've got it wrong, as Nush said, many, many times, because I've, I like somebody and I would therefore invest in that person, although they may be wrong for the business, for example. So, it's that kind of balancing act between the two. But for me, I think what I've done is actually I've divided my approach into three. So, and it's always there, and it's the passion for what I'm doing, whether that's a paid job or a volunteering activity. It's profit, which is about making money and making that, mindfully, and then purpose. And the purpose bit has really been strong for me since the pandemic. I've literally been thinking, well, does this make a difference to me? Does it make a difference to the market I'm trying to address? So it's the balancing act between the three: passion, profit, and purpose. At least for me, it is.
Fantastic. Yeah. Nish, do you have anything to add to that? It is quite an interesting topic.
It really is. I mean, I work for myself. I'm a solopreneur. And actually, the great thing about co-founding the London Space Network meant that I had co-founders. Now, having co-founders is amazing because you have experts that are have expertise in the same organization that you're building and bring different skill sets. Ideally, that's really what you should look for in co-founders, in my experience. Now, when it comes to myself, because I can be selfish, and I don't really think of selfish as a negative word. I think of selfish akin to self-care, in that you are purposely driven. And I think with the work that I've achieved with Naught, which is a portfolio company across the space and innovation and technology space, is that I'm always looking to learn. And like Lupa, my goal in life is to be a lifelong learner. And so I'm a sense maker and connector. And so for me, when I go to work with someone on a project, my values and their values have to align for an outcome to be positive and in the direction that we all wanted it to be before taking it on, right? So there have been times where I've been sitting on a fence about a project and I've had to say no, because I know as much as I could deliver it and amazing that the invoice coming in and getting paid would be amazing, the cost on feeling burnt out afterwards was never going to be worth it. So sometimes it's really hard to say no, and balancing the rational, Lupa was saying, and the empathetic side or the kind of emotional side of it, to me means that everything in that, I love that triangle model. If all of those things are in balance, then great. But sometimes we need the money more because that money is going to raise the investment that you need for the next stage of your business. So sometimes sucking it up and having to do things that are boring and admin that I particularly know that I don't love to do, that I can't always outsource, sometimes I'm going to weigh that all up and actually suck it up and do it. And it's hard, but it might mean that the next time around, I definitely put my foot down and agree that I'm not going to do that again. But in that moment, I've agreed to do something. So I'm going to willfully and passionately and do it, because sometimes you just have to roll your sleeves up and do things that you don't always love.
Absolutely. It's interesting because there was also a study that said entrepreneurs really have to trust their gut feelings, actually quite a lot. When we think of businessmen or businesswomen and entrepreneurs, we think that they have these calculators as their minds, constantly thinking of profits and money and all that. Whereas it doesn't work that way. And now it would be a good time to actually ask Ryan to elaborate on this a little bit, since you have a passion and a message that you really try to sort of send around regarding dyslexia and how it's not a disability but a superpower. So this is something that cannot be really understood with a real strictly rational way of thinking, but it's more about your personal embodied experience. Would you like to explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So it's funny. It's probably something I never talked about for a while. I've always struggled with it in school. It's only recently I actually started talking about it. And yeah, I think you mentioned the point there about decision making, and you also mentioned the point there about bringing up dyslexia and being dyslexic. And I think what's important for the audience probably to note is, before I go into things, is I've recently finished up my studies. So a lot of students that are probably listening to this call, or maybe on this call, I can empathize with them going through maybe the education system and maybe having dyslexia or having or being neurodiverse. It's a struggle in the education system, especially for people that may be a bit more creative or entrepreneurs, which I can talk about in depth about the research that I looked into. But yeah, it's something that's tricky, especially during maybe a pandemic, especially with someone that if you already struggle in the education system, as even a student that's on the call, in third level education, and now you have to doing it from home and everything's online, it can be a real tricky situation. So I have a lot of empathy for people that are online now, if you are students working from home.
It might be a good time to address a question that we have from Hasti. She says, I have a question for Ms. Patel. How are entrepreneurs, how can they, I think she means that, how can they know to what extent they can trust this gut feeling that they have?
Yes, your gut feeling can be wrong. Absolutely, that is correct. But the only way, I think, is to ask other people what their thoughts are, and then to really listen to the answers. And I know I've said it before, but entrepreneurs are really bad at only listening or only hearing what they want to hear. So that's why I would ask different types of advisors, especially if it's related to the business. And I would say often there's a hierarchy of advisors. So if somebody is invested in your business, they should be your number one advisor, and you should really listen, particularly if they've invested in your business. There are other mentors, for example, personal mentors versus business mentors, or a third party impartial individual, and just say, look, this is the scenario. They will ask you some more questions, perhaps to elaborate, and then listen to what they have to say. You may not like what they have to say, but that's better than relying on your gut feel, especially if you are not sure that your gut is, or you're not confident in your gut. And I think give yourself a break. You're not going to have all the answers. You're certainly not going to have all the right answers. So give yourself a break and say, right, I'm going to do it like this. And then give a pause. If it's overnight, a day, have a pause just to really let some of those comments that you've had, the feedback that you've had. And then at the bottom line, the gut feel, even if you're still thinking, no, this is what I want to do, what I tend to do is try and think about, who is this going to hurt? Is this going to hurt anybody? And this goes back to the kindness thing. Is it mean? Is it going to hurt somebody? Is it going to, damage something, damage a relationship? And then that, I think, will help you eventually, reach the right decision for you.
Absolutely.
Great question.
Yes, it really was a great question, and a hard one to sort of answer, because it ultimately does come back to your own intuition. It's something that you inevitably have to approach it intuitively at some point, at least. Ryan, a question in the same field, actually. The first time you decided to create content for the general public, was that a rational decision, or was it like something purely based on your own emotions, something that felt right to you?
So I was always creative growing up. Well, I like to think I was, and I used to do crazy things art-wise or whatnot, because I was rubbish at all the other subjects in school, and I used to love art. But when it came to the reason why I started creating content and putting myself out there is because I was actually self-employed. I was working in the fitness industry. I was a personal trainer a few years ago, and I was trying to get clients. And I had a group of clients, and I started creating some videos for them in a Facebook group. And I posted one or two videos, and then one of them says, you know what, Ryan, you should think about putting that on YouTube. And I was like, no, I can't do that. What are people going to say about me? The fear around creating content, what are people going to think? What are my family going to say? I'm not an expert, I don't have a PhD in anything, how can I talk about these things? So I decided to take their advice, and I decided to create a piece of content for the first time and put it on YouTube. And I was terrified. I turned off my phone, didn't look at it, threw it away outside my bedroom, and just almost went for a nap. And woke up the next day, I think it was the next day, and realized that no one said anything bad about it. And if anything, I got a lot of positive feedback from clients, and I had more people asking me questions that were interested in what I was saying. And people started to resonate with it. And I was like, I can't believe this. I was so terrified of putting myself out there online. But similar to the question, I just followed my gut feeling and my intuition, and it trusted me really well, even though I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. So yeah, that was the feeling of putting content out online. Massive fear, but delighted I did it. And yeah.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. So my understanding is that as entrepreneurs, people can trust and probably should trust their gut feelings. But as Lopa said, it's always good to sort of take a break, not sort of rush into anything, and ask for ideas from different people as well, because that's also it's this sort of collective knowledge, isn't it? And use other people's experience to sort of be able to evaluate this gut feeling that we have. That's really interesting. Nish, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I love it. I also have a board of advisors. Like I'm 40 and I always struggled with finding a mentor. Like all through my career, I've never had a formal mentor. Like I found coaches, or I've had beautiful conversations. Perhaps when Luba and I, we sat down the last time we saw each other, and we had a wonderful, I think it was like an hour, we were just chatting after an event, and it was beautiful. And I think finding, whether it's accountability buddies that are going to be there for you, or a team of people that you can go to, or whether you curate a list on Twitter of people to follow that are experts, that you aspire to see how their journey has grown. Or like David said, like find the people that have the experience, that are even a few steps ahead of you in the grand scheme of where you're going, because the access to information that they give you will often save you a lot of time and heartache that you've been otherwise unable to find. And I think sometimes, particularly now because of COVID, it can be very isolating and lonely right now. You're not seeing people like serendipitously bumping into someone. Like I remember bumping into a TechCrunch editor in New York randomly, and I managed to blag my way into TechCrunch Disrupt. And that's not necessarily a scenario that we're going to find ourselves in currently. But if you're looking to like curate or write content for maybe a tech publication such as TechCrunch, maybe it's following that journalist and commenting on articles they've written and giving your thoughtful response. And, you know, there is always a way around it. But I definitely find that if you haven't found a mentor, if you're struggling to find someone, create an organization amongst your peers and share resources, and that will open up doors and other avenues that you may have otherwise not felt that you've had access to.
So can I just add something there? I think you can also be your own mentor, in the sense that don't get anxiety. Just to echo Nush, I've found it very difficult to get a mentor at the right time of my entrepreneurship journey. So often you can be your own mentor by revisiting scenarios where you've had difficulty and looking at mentally how you dealt with it and what the outcome was and what you could have done differently, and just imagining that scenario and then kind of locking that away. So the next time you have a similar situation, you become your own mentor. So don't get anxiety over not having a mentor.
I think that's a great point. Sorry if I don't just put in here for a moment, but I think that's a really great point, Luke. But I just want to double down on that point as well. Like, I think, and it's something I probably haven't heard spoken about enough, is, as you mentioned, self-reflecting on your own decisions in the past, where you went right or where you went wrong. And it's almost like you begin to realize when you take that time to self-reflect, which I think is harder now than ever with all digital distraction. You get a real great sense of what's working and what's not working in the past. And also just to echo the point of having digital mentors as well, which I think is really extremely valuable, because I'm on my phone most of the day. You know, I'm on a line most of the day, and I follow people or listen to podcasts or follow people that I aspire to or look up to. And it's not just having one mentor, having a ton of different ones online, you know, I think is really valuable as well. So just echo both points said. I think they're really, really important points.
So now let's move on to the consumer, as economists actually call it, but more generally, the people who are out there, whether they use your service or product in a more rational way, or you sort of rely on their emotions to create this, to create a value for them. I'm interested to know, how do you think, and it's really uncertain right now regarding how this future consumer is going to look like, how he or she is going to decide what to go for, the preferences, the choices. And entrepreneurs really need to have some sort of a speculation regarding what this world, what the economy is going to look like post-COVID. So regarding the consumer, Luca, would you like to start by telling us, how can we sort of speculate? Because we're trying to sort of create a value, our value proposition, but we don't know what the world, or more specifically, what the consumer is going to look like in the near future.
Okay. I mean, the one thing I would say, and I said it earlier, is that the future is always uncertain. It's always been, through the generations, the future is always uncertain. My generation, we've had the massive technological impact, all the time I've been growing. And so not to be put off by that. There is plenty of evidence about the future consumer. My own take on it is that the new consumer is much more purpose-driven. They're looking much more around values for all the products and services that they purchase. Obviously, apart from COVID, the environment and climate change are big topics. So I think the newer consumers are more environmentally conscious. So they will be asking things about, do I really need a gas guzzling car, for example? Do I really need to take that trip on a flight? Could I do it some other way? I think what I see amongst the next generation, if I can call it that, is their style is much more collaborative. So in my time, it's been much more knock out all the competition and win. Whereas here, it's much more collaborative about, could I partner with you and perhaps both of us, therefore, gain access to a market or create a collaborative product. In terms of community, I think the newer consumer is less tolerant of racism, less tolerant of sexism, less tolerant of discrimination. And that goes across all genders, nationalities, ethnicities, age. And they're more tolerant of different personality types. So I think, I don't know your audience base, but a lot of the younger people just don't understand why the older generation has a problem with certain things. And that's a mindset, and that's taken right the way through to the products and services that they actually purchase and the types of companies the new consumer will want to buy from and work for. I think the new consumer is also going to be quite discerning in the sense of, if you talk about food, they'll want to know where the food comes from. They'll be much more consuming within their capacity, so not looking to waste. I mean, COVID, we've had this grand thing of everybody stockpiling loo rolls and hand wash and it just seems bizarre when you don't need to do that, and so the new consumer is much more about using things at the appropriate time. And I think the model, which entrepreneurs are going to be quite interested in, is going to move away from outright ownership of things to perhaps usage. I'll use this as I need it and I'll pay for it as I need something, rather than having to have an asset on a balance sheet and not be able to capitalize on that.
Absolutely. It's actually really interesting. I think I do agree with you that it's not just enough to be an entrepreneur and to own a business, but your business has to have this thing we call a corporate social responsibility. And more consumers are going to care about this. And it's really interesting because during the interview we had with Professor Cass Sunstein, which we will sort of play that during tomorrow's event, but he mentioned something really interesting. He said that consumers will rely more on their emotions after COVID, because their emotions really, it was like really hit hard by COVID, wasn't it? So they will sort of care more about how they're feeling right now. Nush, how do you think we will see this in the near future, hopefully post-COVID, if that's ever going to come?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and they are amazing. If you've not looked into them, there are 17 areas that are aligned to key issues that affect every single human on our planet. And I think if we can get governments, businesses, organizations, anyone that is able to align towards those goals, there are frameworks that have already been designed, and there are whole packs of information that really already do a lot of the work for you in aligning to those goals and providing the impact we need to see. So I'd like to think that we can find an optimization of work that's already been done. But also, one of the things that I found quite disparaging about the COVID pandemic is the fact that every nation state decided, instead of being collaborative, as Lupa mentioned, they decided to basically solve COVID in their own jurisdiction, in their own way. And that really upsets me, because I think, what is the point of the UN and other such organizations that are there to bring nations together for the greater good of all of us on our planet? You know, our planet is our only hospitable place in the solar system at the moment. And as much as I love the future of going back to the moon and onto Mars, unless we can captivate and use that technology to provide the impact to make our planet better for everyone, there is no point in having a planet B option, because there won't be a planet to preserve and humanity to save in the first instance. So if we can't use technology now and think about the impact that are aligned to like key human goals, it breaks my heart that we're now seeing all these images of birds and wildlife with disposable masks. You know, like, cut the strings off. If I appreciate that you have to use them, cut the strings off and dispose of it carefully in the way that you can, because COVID is having undue effects to our environment. And I think, like Lupa mentioned, I think we're much more value oriented as consumers. I'd like to think that I'm a mindful consumer of products and services, and I intend to do so even more going forward. Everything from sustainable clothing and choosing where I choose to purchase my clothing, or repairing. I actually repaired a jumper the other day that had a hole. I found a tutorial on YouTube and did an invisible stitch, and it's perfect, right? To thinking about where your pension investments are going. And thinking about, I think it's Conscious Capitalism, which is Mariana Mazzucato's new book, and really considering about where consciously perhaps governments can be held to account of how they're moving forward with the projects that they're investing in for public services, for instance. But equally, over the summer, I worked on a project that was looking at food deserts, and the fact that in parts of America, in the developing world, I mean, as much as here in the UK, we're dependent on food banks. In America, if you have a food desert, it means you haven't got a walking distance to any organic, not even organically grown, but food that is grown in a walking distance from where you live. There are some people in America that have to get on 2 buses to go and get fresh fruit and vegetables. That is a travesty to me. Like, why are we shipping food in from all around the world when we could be doing this much more smartly, but also nourishing? I believe in this concept that Satish Kumar, who's this amazing former monk and peaceful purveyor in the world, and his ethos is soil, soul, and society. And I think that's an underlying factor. Soil, obviously, the soil we nurture to grow. Society, the community way that we all come together to like help each other, but also support one another. And soul, looking into yourself and doing the work that we've all talked about today, being empathetic, being kind to yourself as to others. But yeah, I can see Ryan nodding, so I'm going to like consciously capture that energy and like throw it to him without hopefully putting you on the spot, Ryan.
No, not at all. Sorry, I was looking up there because the light changed slightly. You know, the rain. Anyway, no, but I completely agree with those points. I think a big thing about the future of consumption and consumer as well is, I think a lot of that's out of my expertise. I'm not able to predict the future, but I think what's important, which Lopa mentioned, is about uncertainty. And like right now, it's really, really uncertain times. But what I know to be true is, in my local area or even with my family and friends, I'm seeing people use the internet that have never used the internet before. Like, my dad bought a present for someone that online for the first time, you know, like seeing even like my granny going online for the first time. Like, it's just opening up this incredible amount of opportunity for all the good in the world. And for us to achieve amazing things. But I think that's one observation that I've made during this time, even for like, if you're an entrepreneur listening to this, maybe an opportunity to capitalize on. But I think all I can speak is from my experience, and that is something that I find is really, really interesting about how many people are going online and adopting this internet. And how's that going to change in the future is really, really something to note. And I think it's something that's been on my mind for the last few months.
Lopa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think just picking up on this question about, you know, would the post-COVID economy look like? And I've certainly been giving it a lot of thought, as most entrepreneurs have. And there's been a lot of discussions about hybrid style of working. People don't want to work full time in an office. So how will businesses be able to capitalize on, staff working halfway from home or half the time from home and half the time in the office? I think that's something that's occupying a lot of minds at the moment. What will the style of working be? But I think the other thing as well that I've experienced, and I don't know if my fellow panelists have as well, is that I've actually found I'm more productive. I can get more done in less hours simply because I'm working from home. I'm having to focus on the task at hand. Obviously, it's cut out the commute. So there's shorter bursts of attention making you more productive. And I think that productivity curve is something that entrepreneurs will be pleased to hear about, because I know most of them think, well, some entrepreneurs are saying, well, out of sight, out of mind, which is a genuine concern. And others are saying, well, people are not putting in the hours, or they're not going to achieve what their targets are. And actually, the reality is I'm being more productive. So surely one should expect everybody else to be more productive as well. And obviously, picking up on what Ryan was saying, that, I think our video conferencing at the moment is terrible. If we had 100 times improvement in video conferencing, maybe augmented reality added in there, it's going to be amazing, isn't it? And 5G is just around the corner. So even with all the uncertainty, don't forget about the optimistic things that are coming just on the horizon. I mean, 5G is almost here. The companies making video conferencing is here. There's better collaboration tools. All the ones I've used are pretty basic at the moment. But that's not to say that the next iteration of that tool is not going to be better. And I think I would just end by saying that surprisingly in 2020, the number of new businesses set up has shot up by 13% on 2019. So I keep going back to my original thing, that uncertainty and adversity also breed opportunity, is that entrepreneurs in different countries will build the businesses that suit their environment and suit their style of community, society, infrastructure. I don't think we have all the answers. I think that's the difference. We do not have all the answers, and the entrepreneurs in those countries will use whatever the local scenario is to build the right business for them. And I think we need to be open to those ideas and think about those ideas and maybe import some of those ideas here. We don't have all the answers, so learn from each other.
The fact that only less than 1% of venture capital funding in the UK goes to Black entrepreneurs, and that's a travesty. And even women's startups are so underfunded. And I think until we see that shift, particularly here in the West, what I am seeing amongst my friends in the YSYS community, which is Your Startup, Your Story, I'm on their advisory board. In fact, I've just finished and wrapped 2.5 years of sitting on that board, is without a lack of access to VC funding, communities are self-funding from within their community. And as much as we always talk about products being designed for consumers and demonstrating your market, unless the VC environment is more diverse and understands the value in such diverse products and services, they're missing a beat. They're missing the future investment. They're missing the fact that they need to build bridges to underrepresented and underserved communities. The brown pound is what I call, all of the Asian products that my family has bought through generations, but some of that has only just started to be represented in the supermarket, and access to those sorts of products. So until we get to see more VC money really funding those diverse businesses, it's challenging. I'm just gonna leave that point there and hope that molds and kind of hits home.
Absolutely. Just curious to know, Ryan, who was your role model?
Geez, my role models change all the time, for different projects and for everything, depending where it is. But what I'd love to say is, just because a lot of what we're talking about is definitely out of my expertise. But I'd love to add a point that to what Lopa was mentioning about action and about taking action. because I found that really, really insightful in uncertainty. And I think for like, as previously being a student and even starting a new project, regardless who my role model is, I always go back to the concept that I've recently learned about 2 years ago, is the concept of imperfect action. And I think it'd be so easy before you get started to try figure out, okay, who's my role model? What's everyone doing? You know, whether it's a project, who am I going to look up to? What's the next thing? And try to have the road perfectly painted ahead. But what I've adopted and what's really helpful for me, and why I say that my role model changes so much, is by taking just the next step, because that's the only thing you can see in front of you. As Lopa mentioned about the future, you know, it is really uncertain. But I think the concept of that I really love to utilize in my own life, of taking that imperfect action, even if you don't have a role model, even if you don't have the resources, it's just taking that first step. Not just for entrepreneurship, but any sort of project in my life, whether that could be starting exercising. You know, I think it's a really something that I've been pondering and thinking about on this call when we were talking about the future as well.
So often hesitancy on the part of entrepreneurs in either making a decision or starting up or scaling up is because they fear failure. But actually, you have to almost embrace it. That, you know, you've got to say, well, what's the worst that can happen? It might happen, but I can try and mitigate some of the risks that I'm taking. But you mustn't fear failure. I think you've just got to learn from it, you know, and where something has failed, you've got to be able to sort of cauterize it, almost put it on one side, but use it as a learning experience for yourself, but not such that it stops you actually making that decision, because you know, you have to move forward. You have to make decisions. And fear of failure, I think, is often what holds people back.
Ryan, would you like to tell us a little bit regarding any special changes that you noticed in terms of your business, and how your business has sort of experienced the ups and downs of COVID, and how you think you would come out of this period of time as some sort of normality gradually gets reintroduced back into our lives, hopefully?
Yeah. So it's actually interesting. I transitioned over the last number of years from being self-employed to going back into academia and finishing up, as a lot of students are here, maybe in academia, and then transitioning to be an employee again for the first time. So I've always been self-employed and transitioning to be an employee. And I think during these times, as we've already spoken about before, I can't speak to how my business would change in the future. What I can speak to is what we can control, or what I can control anyway. And I found that was a really, if I was self-employed now, and if I had my own business right now, I couldn't imagine the level of uncertainty that people are going through with regards to like whatever business model you're having, whether it's growth through the internet and what that's happening, or whether it's a local restaurant or a pub. I couldn't imagine the level of uncertainty. So, but I think one point that I'd love to reiterate is it's okay to, for me anyway, this is what I like to tell myself, that it's okay to change your mind. Maybe you're a student, you're maybe thinking about setting up a business, or whether I go into a job, I'm not too sure. Like, it's a pandemic, I don't know, like, will I take the risk? And what I always say to myself, like, it's okay to change my mind. I could try something on the side for a bit maybe, and then I can go back. But at least, especially when you're a student, and if you're a student entrepreneur, and if you have a business on the side as a student, it's okay to change your mind and try different things. And just because of the audience that are probably listening, that's one thing that I will say that in the past I've been maybe not a victim of, but I was like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to start this business, and I'm going to stay in the fitness industry. But I've changed my mind multiple times, and looking back was probably through following my gut, as Lopa mentioned. It's probably been the best decisions. And during this time with a lot of uncertainty, just knowing that it's okay to change your mind can be really helpful, especially if you're a student and not sure what you want to do next.
Do you have any tips or tricks for people to actually either not get afraid of this state, or learn a trick to sort of overcome it and get out of it, snap out of it, and just...
It's okay if you don't want to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to be an entrepreneur. If you're happy to work in a job and have that financial security and learn about the processes and procedures, because that's going to give you the experience, the connections, the network, the peer support group. Because all of those things I mentioned, if you're a leaver out of union, you start in a startup, you won't always have that structure, support, processes even, and it can be sometimes quite disruptive. Like I've worked across an array of different startups, and every one of them have had a totally different internal structure, or not even had a structure. I had a life before this whole kind of like entrepreneurial thing that we all talk about so much over the last, 10 years. And I remember working for a startup in Shoreditch and unlearning every process I'd ever learned in all of the organizations that I'd worked in previously. That broke me, and I'm not going to lie. It broke me, but I learned so much, right? I was the girl that went from A, B, C, D, all the way through to Z. And working for that startup, I learned that to get to Z, I had to go to G, to F, to K, to L, back to A, back to B. And it killed me, but I learned so much. So like Ryan said, this is your opportunity to learn and get as much experience across as many things that you wish to really have a deeper understanding. I would say this particularly in your 20s and even into your mid 30s of the direction of where you want to carve out and grow your future business, your experience, and genuinely what you want to learn. Because I am now 40, I only decided that I wanted to be self-employed when I finished my job at the Olympics back in 2012. And that was a 9-month project role that gave me a gap in my previous career, having worked in politics, to understand and relearn what my passions were. And that was technology, space, and startups. That's all I had, 3 things. And then something in space happened, and I got invited by NASA to attend the launch of a satellite. And here I am, X many years later, living my best life. But it is challenging. And had it not been for my really unusual portfolio background, I wouldn't even get to where I am now. I've struggled where people have looked at my CV and turned me down for jobs countless times, because I never would, in their eyes, fit into their organization because of the diversity in my sort of portfolio career. But I would say, if you can discover what your values and passions are that drive you, you can get to whatever that business is it could be in a year's time, but it also could be in 10 years' time. And don't put pressure on yourself for that timing. An idea today doesn't have to be invoked in full and have a shiny website and everything sorted in a year's time. It's okay, right? Use this time to really get that grounding, get that knowledge base, understand your market, find those investors that are going to invest in you, find that board of advisors, find that mentorship, do that short course. And all of the other things will fall into place. But it just goes back to my initial thing that timing is one of the things that you can never control.
I guess the tip is to do something for somebody else. And that's why I always make it a point to volunteer for a charity or sit on a charity board, something completely unrelated to your business, which can often consume my time a lot more than the business does. But at least it's that feedback you get from just giving of your time is so valuable. It gives you a sense of self-worth, if one can call it that. Because sometimes as an entrepreneur, you go into a black hole, especially when things are going wrong. And so that's one thing that will help you. For myself, I've decided to keep a balance. So that's why I am an entrepreneur and more than one business, but also I'm on several boards. And also I run a charity, the Diversity UK is an equality charity. So I do those 3 things very consciously because each role gives me gives me back something different. So yeah, you do need to get balance in your life. And actually the COVID time is when I've had to rebalance that because I felt entrepreneurs, you're 100 miles an hour all the time. And you get hooked on that. There's a real adrenaline rush from that and you get hooked on that. But actually, for your own mental well-being and your own physical well-being, it's good to have a balance by giving something back, working in a charity maybe, and also having some other things that are not related to your business in your life.
I always go back to it is digging the well before you're thirsty. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of term like networking gets thrown around a lot, and I don't really like the term networking. Sometimes I can feel it's a bit like short-term, transactiony. But I know it's tough when you're at home as well. But even attending these events or meeting people or doing something valuable for someone, the more connections that I was managed to get when I was studying during my MSc and during my undergrad, that really helped me then when I was leaving out to the job market. And it wasn't just right now, let's say when you're always looking for jobs interviews, who do I know can get me a job? I built up that relationships in the past for a year, 6 months, that when it's time to come to the job market, it was a lot easier because I built that relationship and I didn't have to ask someone. People are like, oh, I know Ryan, he's doing X, Y, and Z. I think he'd be good for this position. The second thing that really helped me, and I know I'm going to go on a bit here. So the second thing that really helped me was putting myself out there online. And I think applying for jobs or even starting a project, it can be for applying for jobs, a lot of the times it's with outbound inquiries. I'm sending a CV here. I'm trying to get an interview with this company. I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z. Whereas I found that putting myself out there online, I wasn't just focusing on the outbound and CVs and interviews and having to talk to people to start a project. Things were actually coming to me because of putting yourself out there online, which is, we go back to talking about the fear and being uncomfortable. But yeah, even so those two things really, really helped me when I was transitioning to that stressful moment. Digging the well before you're thirsty, and definitely talking about things you're interested in online and talking about the experiences you're going through is a great vehicle to get to the next step, from my experience. But it can be different from everyone else.
I just wanted to add as well very quickly is that I have friends who are recruiting for various roles. So think of myself, Ryan, Luca, and all of the other speakers today as vessels, right? Come and follow us on our social media channels, connect with us on LinkedIn. But equally, my friends that are currently recruiting in their organizations and even startups, they're looking at new dynamic ways to onboard and make new employees feel included. And that is something that people are still trying to figure out, right? It's not just about having a hamper being delivered and being like, welcome to the team, or here's your startup t-shirt, right? There's so much more that comes from joining a team, being onboarded, learning what the processes are, what technology are they using? Are they using Trello? Are they using Slack? Do they have other software that you'll have to get? Are they going to send you a laptop? Will you have to use your laptop? All of those things. Do you have Wi-Fi? So don't worry that all of these things haven't yet been figured out, because I think a lot of people are still trying to understand the next step after getting the job. And I think diversifying your community and network and peers by networking or connecting on LinkedIn, whether it's Clubhouse, which is like the hottest app at the moment, whether it is TikTok or whether it is Instagram, you know, finding those channels that you feel comfortable with, particularly if you are an introvert. Like, often, like you've mentioned, like I may come across also as quite extroverted. Once I've done a talk on stage, whether it's online, the next day I'm a wreck. Like, I'm done. I'm like, I need a duvet day. And it's okay, because we all give energy in different ways, and then we need to recharge in different ways. So being rejected from something, I often found, was because it wasn't going to be the right fit for me, but also for that organization. So try not to take it personally, because often, particularly if you are looking to join a startup, it is pretty brutal, right? A lot of people are thinking about the money that they've just raised, that they've got a finite time to spend before the next round comes along. And they have to be very aligned to KPIs and objectives. And sometimes in business, it's really brutal, but it might be factors that you can't control that are leading to decisions that you're unaware of. So it's really easy to take things personally. But remember, there's a whole swathe of like invisible forces that are acting in these organizations and startups, particularly, that you may not be as yet unaware of. So all you can do is connect with people that can give you that dynamic or diverse approach to new opportunities that maybe you would have otherwise not discovered.
They both mentioned, I think it's so important, maybe a point that I don't know if it was necessarily, I'd love to just reiterate it, was they're both of such diverse experiences, and that's probably gotten them to where they are today. Very successful individuals. And sometimes, I know for myself entering the job market, sometimes we can play down our diverse experience because, as you said, they may not look good in our CV, but sometimes your diversity of experiences in the past can be your competitive advantage when you're entering the job market. So that's something to just note as well when maybe you're thinking about your CV, and has helped Anushka and Lupa to get where they are today. You know, and probably myself is the level of diversity experiences, and not to play those down. They can be real strengths. They can help you with a competitive advantage when you're entering the job market.
Thank you each. Ryan, Anushka, Lopa, thank you so much for joining us today.